Okay, so we've got our rectangle. The first thing we're gonna sew is we're gonna sew these two edges together to create kind of the barrel shape. So I'm gonna use my needle, and I'm just gonna kind of twist it a little bit to get it to fit into my needle. There we go. And then it's nothing super special. We're just gonna kind of hold it together and then sew it together. So I'm gonna kind of go underneath these loops as best I can and just kind of sew these two edges together. Nothing super special. I'm just going underneath edges that seem about even. You don't have to worry too much about being exact. Okay, so I'm just sewing them together. You're kind of making a lovely little cylinder there. Okay, so you're just gonna go all the way. And then after that, we'll look at sewing the top and the bottom together. Okay, so through there. Through there. Okay, we're kind of nearing the end. Okay, so now that I'm at the end, what I'm gonna do is this is the little bit of extra yarn from when I started. I'm just gonna kind of tuck that below so I don't have that in the way. Now, here's the cool part. We're gonna do, in order to kind of get it kind of stuffed like this, we're gonna do what's called like a drawstring. So in order to do that, what you do is you go alternating directions. So what I'll do is I'll go inwards the first time, and I'm not gonna pull too tight. I'm gonna go inwards. Then the next little stitch, I'm gonna go outwards towards me. So you're gonna kind of just go all the way around. So in the next one, going alternating directions, out. And what's gonna happen is when we're done, we're gonna be able to pull it tight and it's gonna close the top for us. So just kind of back and forth. So inwards, outwards, inwards, right? And as I'm going, I'm just kind of going underneath each of these little loops. This was like from our foundation chain, so it's not a defined stitch or anything. Inwards, I'm just kind of going underneath there. Outwards, and then we'll be able to pull tight and it's gonna look more like a cactus. So just back and forth every single time. And you don't have to be terribly exact. If you just go, you know, in each stitch, you're good. If you miss one, it's okay. You just wanna try and get decently around the cactus. And I know where I'm gonna be done when I get to this little piece that was left tucked inside. It's kind of my signal. Inwards. Outwards. Inwards. Outwards. And then last one, we're gonna do inwards. So here's what we're gonna do now. What's really cool is all I have to do is I'm gonna hold this and I'm gonna pull this tight, and it's gonna do a drawstring close and get a pretty well-defined little circle there at the top. And what's kind of cool is it, you know, will kind of make it a little lumpy in places. Which I think if you look back at like my original one, I think it's kind of nice because you get kind of that lumpiness around and it looks a little bit more like a real cactus. If you want to, you know, sew it together as well, You can also, you know, kind of go across and like try and sew it a little bit more together, but however you want to sew it is fine. The drawstring does a really good job of kind of sealing it for you. Okay, so here's what it looks like, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna be filling it with this poly fiber, and then we're gonna be sewing the bottom and then putting it into this. And it's okay if it looks a little bit bigger. You can kind of see from my example one that I made that I kind of squish it in. So it's okay if it looks bigger than your pot. You can kind of like force it in there and then it will hold okay. Before we sew that in, you can also sew a flower on top if you'd like a flower. I do have some flowers pre-made. Okay, so now we're going to take our little flower and attach it to the top. You don't need to have a flower or anything, but if you want to attach something, this is kind of the best time to. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the needle that's still on the green, and you're gonna just kind of stick that straight through the middle, and you're gonna pull it through. We're just gonna get the green yarn out of the way for right now. You're gonna take the needle off of that piece of thread, and now we've got the top to work with, so we can sew on our pink flower or whatever color flower you choose. I'm just gonna attach the long tail right to the needle, that way we have a long tail to sew it on. And then I like doing it now before stuffing, because then what you can do is you can snip stuff off on the inside and then stuff it and no one sees it. So I'm just kind of finding the top, and I'm just going to kind of stick the needle in about where the top looks like it is. And then this guy will hide under the middle eventually, so you don't need to worry about that. Then I'm going to kind of come through the middle to attach it, kind of go, you know, through bits and pieces, kind of catching some of this green underneath. You know, however is easiest for you to sew it on. It does not have to be perfect or anything like that. Just however you're able to sew it on is fine. Okay, and then once you get it attached and you're satisfied, I might do maybe one more time kind of for here, just to get this kind of attached a little bit better. Just kind of want to make sure you've got a decent amount on each of the corners or the edges, that sort of thing. So once you've got it decently attached and you're happy, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this yarn and just kind of stick it into the middle. So I'm just gonna kind of go through, and I'm coming up here. Okay, so now the top is all pretty. And now on the bottom, what I'm gonna do is I've got a shorter end. So I've got the long tail that I'm gonna use later, but this is a shorter end from before. And I like to just kind of tie my ends together. So I've got my little pink end, I've got a little green end in here from before. If not, you can just make like a little knot with the pink on its own. But sometimes I find it's easier if I already have a string down there just to tie them off together. And then you're just gonna stick those both in here. Remember to keep this one. This is gonna help us close off our cactus. And then to kind of pull this guy in, I'm just gonna attach this. You could also use a crochet hook, angle it downwards. That way I can hide it in here. I'm just gonna kind of pull it through. There we go. So I've got this all attached. On the top, I've got my little flower. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna reattach my needle to the original yarn. This was the yarn that we were using to sew the top and to kind of stitch the cactus together. There we go. And then we're just gonna work on sewing the bottom. But first, what we're gonna do, and I'm gonna kind of stick it through one of these little edges here so it's more on the outside now. There we go. What I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna stuff it with polyfill. I've got a whole bag of this stuff for us to use, so everyone should be able to get their cactus all stuffed nicely. Okay. So it looks just about right for my cactus. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my needle, maybe put a little bit more polyfill, depending on how firm you want it, or loose, it's up to you. And then we're gonna do this drawstring method one more time. So I'm kind of on the outside, I'm gonna go in, and you'll see this one's easier because this is actually the tops of stitches. The first time when we were doing it with the foundation chain, and so that one was like a little harder to see. This one you can just kind of go right through the stitches, which is real nice. So remember alternating inwards and outwards. And this will just let us pull it taut and it will seal it into a nice little circle. Being done, I'm gonna just do that drawstring close again. So you see we got like a nice little lump. Pull it taut. And then I typically like to kind of go across. So I'll just kind of go from one side across, sew that in. Then another side all the way across, sew that in. Just kind of one more time just for good measure. Oops, sorry for going off camera. There we go. And so we've got like our little cactus plot. And then what I like to do to sew it off is I'll kind of go near where this is coming up and kind of go underneath a loop. And then I'm gonna use this to do like a little bit of a knot. So I'm gonna kind of hold that up, and then I wanna go through that to kind of get a little bit of a quick knot there, or you can do like a traditional knot. And then what I like to do is I'll kind of pull this so I'm really close to the edge. And then I'll snip it off. So I'll, keep a little bit, maybe like that much. And then I will hide this end in here. So what's kind of cool is what you can do is just kind of poke it through, and you can like have it stick out somewhere else. And you pull the end, and then if you kind of pull it a little bit, you can snip it off, and then that end typically just kind of hides within. Done. I'm gonna take my little terracotta pot, and then all you gotta do is kind of mush it a little bit so it will fit in there. And we've got our little cactus with our little flower. So something to adorn your desk for the beginning of the year.